Hello and thank you for joining me on Cerebration's YouTube channel for this virtual learning webinar. Today we'll be talking about how to craft social change narratives. It should last around about 45 minutes and that'll leave time at the end for any questions. You can submit your questions via the live web chat as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping to get started. If for whatever reason the stream goes down or crashes, just give me a couple of minutes to get it up and running. Also, don't be distracted if my eyes are darting around the place. I'll be playing the role of facilitator, producer, technical support, and I'll be keeping an eye on the stream, PowerPoint, and where possible the live chat as well. I'll try to make things as seamless as possible, but we'll see how it goes. This is also our first live YouTube webinar, so I appreciate your patience with it. Just to get started then, a little bit of an overview of Cerebration. We are a training and learning solutions social enterprise that equips organizations with learning solutions that have a long-lasting impact for both individuals and the organizations they work for. How we do that is we design meaningful learning interventions, and the way we do that is by giving learners a holistic learning experience and that might be in person, it might be virtual, blended, live workshop, or even self-directed learning. We know from research that the most impactful learning utilizes exploration, knowledge, creativity, and connection to engage learners, and that is the foundation of our design. Finally, we have a commitment to providing equitable learning opportunities. One way we do that is we work with corporate clients to subsidize our work to support underserved communities. And a quick introduction of myself and what we're going to be discussing today. So, I am Jamie Brett, and my formative experiences prior to setting up my own social enterprise was supporting the philanthropic ambitions of a prince followed by a billionaire. In a variety of different roles, these include things like frontline youth worker to managing a global talent function that covered New York to Singapore. I've delivered workshops all over the world and to a range of different stakeholders, from disadvantaged young people to senior leaders and working at organisations to unlock their potential. I founded Cerebration at the beginning of this year to pursue the endeavour of designing, developing and delivering meaningful learning interventions to businesses that also have a social impact. It was my 30th birthday yesterday, and I wanted to take the opportunity to use that date as time for a pause for thought. After recovering from a chronic illness as a teenager, I was fortunate enough to be supported by the Prince's Trust charity about 10 years ago. And through a lot of the hard work and kindness of those people, I was given a chance to reach my potential and access potential opportunities that I might have otherwise been out of reach. So this webinar is really a nod to the people who laid the groundwork for myself and for other disadvantaged young people. There are plenty of deserving individuals who need us to mobilize others so they can get the support they need. So, you might be asking, why am I the right person to be talking to you about this? Throughout the last decade, I have delivered a number of public speaking engagements, and 5 years ago I did a TED Talk entitled Equipping a Generation to Take Their Place in the Digital Revolution. Despite having done a lot of public speaking, I found it really difficult to find models that helped structure speeches in a meaningful way. So for a long time, I pretty much just winged it and did what I thought sounded okay. That was up until a couple of years ago when I went to a workshop on using public narrative to make social change. And I really wish I'd come across it sooner because it's so powerful at mobilizing people on a level that really connects with them. Since then, I've taken a lot of time to become a student of that model, and that's what I'm going to be talking you through. In light of some of the incredibly important social change movements that are happening at the moment, for example, climate change activism, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus allyship, feminism, other equality movements, and a whole host of social enterprises doing some incredible work, I thought that this is one way that I could give back to those amazing communities, and I hope that the information from this webinar will help you to go on to create the change that you want to see in the world. So, without any further delay, let's get into the bones of this webinar. We have two objectives for the webinar today. The first one is to recognize how stories can be used to impact emotions, behavior, and action. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the impact of stories on individuals and how that drives their behavior. The second is to apply the public narrative for social change structure to content in order to mobilize others to take action with you. So what we want to be able to do here is use this model in a way that actually mobilizes people to engage in the things that you are passionate about and that you are interested in, and to be able to take action with you. So, a quick overview about how we're going to go about achieving those objectives. Public narrative, just to kind of give you a bit of an overview, is about using stories to resonate with people on a level that they can truly relate with. So we're going to start by looking at why this is and how to leverage that to make authentic connection with people. Then we're going to move on to overviewing the model created by Marshall Gantz, who is the person who developed this model. After that, we're going to look at some recent examples and a letter written by football superstar Marcus Rashford, who does a lot of work on campaigning on ending food poverty and supporting underprivileged children. The last part of the webinar is going to be about helping you to start crafting your social change narrative. So I hope I get his name right, so I apologize if I don't, but Yuval Noah Harari, who is a historian, philosopher, and best-selling author of a book called Sapiens. And this quote really encapsulates the social change story model, which is humans think in stories rather than facts, numbers, or equations. And the simpler the story, the better. So, if you've ever had the opportunity to read Sapiens, I highly recommend it if you haven't. He outlines a lot about how storytelling has become an evolutionary advantage for human beings because our brains have become meaning-making machines because of it. And what that does is it kind of gives the storytelling kind of becomes this human superpower. What it does is it allows us to connect with people who are beyond just our initial tribe, so our biological tribe, like our family, to a much wider tribe who incorporates a huge amount of people. In fact, it could be arguably said that the greatest storytellers have the most enduring legacy. So why are stories so powerful? Well, stories directly impact people's emotions. And by impacting people's emotions, we are able to drive people's behavior. And from driving people's behaviors, we're able to get them to do particular actions and get particular results. So this is a quote by Marshall Gantz, who says, "Our faith traditions interpret themselves as stories because they teach our hearts how to embrace hope over fear and love over isolation." This is a really important aspect of the social change story model and how to use them effectively. Because it is all about being able to connect with people authentically. So Marshall Gantz, just as a quick overview of him, he is a senior lecturer at Harvard University, and he works in teaching leadership, organizing, and civil society. He was introduced to organizing the civil rights movement, introduced to organizing in civil rights movements, and worked on the United Farm Workers for 16 years. He became a trainer and an organizer for political campaigns, unions, and non-profit groups, and has returned to Harvard, where he learned his PhD in sociology. He created this model and is basically credited with devising the successful grassroots organizing of Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign, which is quite a resume to have behind you. So, what is a social change narrative? Well, a social change narrative is a story in which you want to seek to motivate others to join you in specific action. The most important thing is it has to be something that you genuinely feel motivated to achieve. The stories that you are going to be utilizing are part of people being able to connect with you and understand your authenticity and reasons for wanting to be able to support in this cause. So it's really important that it's something that you too believe in. And what's really important as well is to remember that every person has a compelling story to tell. We all have a story that can move others to action. As you learn this skill, you'll be learning how to tell a compelling story about yourself, your constituency, and the need for urgent and hopeful action. In addition, you will gain practice in listening and coaching others to tell a good story. So, how can a social change narrative be used? You might want to be able to support, you might want to mobilize people to join you in some kind of campaign or support network. You see these often as examples where people just want to be able to get others to join them in taking up a particular cause. You might want to be able to mobilize people to support an initiative that you want to take. So it might be an original cause that you want to be able to engage people with and be able to connect with them to understand why you want to do it. You also might want to mobilize people to help you with a challenge in your life, perhaps by providing them with specific expertise or by taking supportive action. And finally, you might want to be able to mobilize colleagues to take action with you on an issue that you feel strongly about. So, what do good stories need? Well, one of the most important aspects of developing our stories is that they have to engage the senses. We need to think about what we see, hear, feel, smell, and taste. The reason that information is so important is it's experiential. So it gives us an idea of how we can relive the story. If somebody is describing features and we can actually see them because of the storytelling that they're doing, then we're going to feel immersed in their story. The next one is it needs to have challenges, choices, and outcomes. One way to be able to describe this is a plot begins with an unexpected challenge that confronts an individual and needs urgent attention to make a choice, and normally a choice for which the individual is unprepared. The choice yields an outcome, and that outcome teaches a moral. I'm going to do a real high-level whistle-top tour of somebody else's story who did this workshop with me, and it goes to show the power of being able to do this because I can still remember it years later. They wanted to highlight the importance of getting vaccinations when travelling. So their story started off by the fact that they were going to a country that they needed vaccinations for. They knew they needed it, but didn't have the time to go and do it, so they decided that they weren't going to. They got off the plane on the other side and they went on to the border force, and at the border force they basically said, can you present this certificate so you've had these vaccinations? He said that he couldn't. The person at the border said they would quite happily accept a bribe. He started to panic, and then the police started to come over, and the person at the border just decided to let him through. So his heart's racing, and he's gone on to go to his hotel room, and he's done lots of travelling, and he's panicked by that, and just taking a little bit of a deep breath, decides that he wants to go for a sleep. What he does is, before going to sleep, opens the window and lies down on his bed, just thinking, nice, calm, time to rest. I've managed to dodge a bullet on that one. When he turns on the lamp next to his bed, he sees his roof is now swarming with mosquitoes all over the place, and he starts to panic because he realizes that he hasn't had these vaccinations that he should do. He also then realizes that if he starts asking people for help and coming in contact with other people, he's actually putting them at risk as well. So this is a good example of where somebody had a choice that they needed to make, and they weren't prepared to be able to make it. That choice yields an outcome, which is that they were sitting there, they were panicked, they were thinking about how this was going to impact, and then they were actually in a risky situation, and that choice resulted in an outcome, and that outcome results in a moral, and the moral being he thinks that he should definitely get vaccinations if he's going to another country, and made it very clear that we should all do the same. So it's a good example of how challenges, choices, and outcomes can be weaved together to be able to get us engaged with storytelling. There are two ways of knowing, and we need to have both. They are through our head and our heart. Public leadership requires both our head and our heart to mobilize others to act effectively on behalf of shared values. It engages people in interpreting why they should change the world, what their motivation is, and how can they act in order to change it, what their strategy is. So public narrative is basically the art of why, the art of translating values into actions and stories. The narrative has to appeal to our heart as well, because we need to understand the experience. The strategy is a critical reflection on that experience, and that's what appeals to our head. Both of these things together create a shared understanding that leads to action. So, motivation as part of that is understanding that our values inspire action through emotion. And this is just a little bit of a visualization of that. So, our emotions inform us of what we value. We can tell what we value because it sends us whether we get angry or whether we're happy about it or however we feel about it. That starts to tell us what our values are. Then our values inspire action through this emotion. So, for example, if I am angry about a particular issue, I am much more likely to go and do something about trying to resolve that issue. Then what happens is because our values inspire action through emotion, our action is part of that decision-making process, and it's based on our judgments of that value. So we are likely to take action if something is something we value, and those values are dictated by emotion. Now, you are probably thinking, Jamie, all of that information is great, but where does the magic happen? And I'm a terrible magician, so here's what's behind the curtain to that. I'm going to break down that there are 3 stories that we need to tell in order to make our social change narratives powerful. And I'm going to start with a quote from a gentleman called Rabbi Hillel that goes, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am not for others, what am I? And if not now, when?" Now that might sound quite high level, so let's break that down into the 3 stories that are there. The first story that we need to talk about is our story of self. So, if I was to put that as part of that quote, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? As individuals, we need to understand why you care. What's your motivation for talking to us about this? Why is this something that you're interested in? And what impact does that have on us? How is this an issue? It might not be something that somebody else has experienced. So therefore, without your story, we don't know that anyone's experienced it necessarily. So that starts to lead on to what our motivation is for talking about it. And therefore, we can understand how to motivate others with that same insight. Our next story is the story of us. So if I am not for myself alone, what am I? Now, the story of us is around connecting people together and making sure that we go, this isn't just your individual experience of it. This is potentially a systemic problem that has a much wider reach. So we need to understand why this has an impact on people. What's the problems that are going on here? And that links to our shared values and our experiences. So therefore, we need to start thinking about how this is a community problem rather than just your problem. And then finally, our last one is our story of now. So if not now, when? This is where we start to highlight the strategy and action that we need people to take, and we start to identify the people that we are calling upon to take action. Brilliant. So, how do we structure public narratives? I'm going to just quickly before I go into that, if you're enjoying what you are seeing and hearing and want to follow the channel, please do hit the subscribe button. It'd be great to have you connect with us for future videos and webinars. So, what we need to think about now is how we connect these three stories together. So we have the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. The first thing that we need to do is connect the story of self to the story of us. And the way that we do that is by understanding that we need to give people the information on why they must act now. And that's by connecting to their heart. And the story of us is going to be how they need to act now. So that's us connecting to their head. And then what we need to do is we need to think about what people must do now. So that's connecting people to action. And in this we say head, heart and hands. If you're thinking of breaking down those stories, head, heart and hands is a good way to remember it. So the story of self connects to the story of us by us talking about community. So that's how we transition into talking about our own experiences to talking about the experiences of the issue that we are talking about. On top of that, we can connect the story of us to the story of now by building urgency. It's really important that we make sure that this problem is a problem that people know that they need to resolve now. Not something down the line, not in 3 months' time, something that is urgently requires our input now. Now, we could just stick with these three stories, but actually a lot of the time when people make speeches, they flick between three of these. And the way that they connect the story of now to the story of us is by creating purpose. So we need to be able to understand what is our purpose of the story of now. And what we'll do when we look at the example a little bit later on is how to connect the stories all together, and then also how to transition in between if we need to. So here is Marcus Rashford's letter to Parliament. I realise that it might be a little bit difficult to see on your screen. So in the description there is a PDF and it says Marcus Rashford's letter, and I've colour coded that to match the colours that we're going to get coming up on the slide in a second. So if you want to have just a quick minute to be able to open that up, maybe make it a little bit more easy for you to be able to see. What you'll see is the document looks something like the colours that we have available there coming up. So yeah, if you can open up the PDF and have a quick look at that. I am not going to read out the whole letter, but there are certain parts that I want to highlight, and I definitely want to highlight that structure. One of the bits that I am going to read out in full is the story of self, because it really sets up what we're talking about in this letter. So, to all MPs in Parliament, on a week that would have opened the UEFA Euro 2020, I wanted to reflect back on May 27, 2016, when I stood in the middle of the Stadium of Light in Sunderland, having just broken the record for the youngest player to score in their first senior international match. I watched the crowds waving their flags and fist pumping to three lions on their shirt, fist pumping the three lions on their shirt, and I was overwhelmed with pride, not just for myself, but for those who had helped me reach this moment and achieve my dream of playing for the England national team. Understand, without the kindness and generosity of the community I had around me, there wouldn't be a Marcus Rashford you see today, a 22-year-old black man lucky enough to be making a career playing the game that I love. My story here is all too familiar for families in England. My mum worked full-time earning a minimum wage to make sure that we all had a good evening meal on the table, but it was not enough. The system was not built for families like mine to succeed, regardless of how hard my mum worked. As a family, we relied on breakfast clubs, free school meals, and the kind actions of our neighbours and coaches. Food banks and soup kitchens were not alien to us. I recall very clearly a visit to the Northern Moors to collect our Christmas dinner every year. It's only now that I really understand the enormity of that sacrifice my mum had to make in sending me away to live in digs aged 11, a decision no mother would ever make lightly. So, this is Marcus Rashford using the story of us, and that's that yellow section that you can see on the letter. The bit that I really want to be able to highlight on this bit is the last paragraph that we have there, where it talks about his family visiting the Northern Moors to be able to collect Christmas dinners every year. the reason that this is so powerful as a memory is you start to imagine being there. He creates this environment where we start to understand the decisions that his mother was having to make. I want to refer back to something that we were talking about earlier, which is challenges, choices, and outcomes, and the idea that starts with an unexpected challenge that confronts an individual with the urgent need to pay attention, to make a choice for which the individual is unprepared, and the choice yields an outcome, and that outcome teaches a moral. Now, in this example, it's not necessarily just Marcus's stories or Marcus's choices that we're talking about, but he is highlighting the difficult choices that his mother had to make for his well-being, and the moral is that he understands what a huge sacrifice that is. So, our next bit is we're now moving into the story of us, and this is Marcus trying to bring us into his tribe. He wants us to feel like we are part of that community that he's talking about. So the first example I'm going to highlight is just here in that first paragraph, where it says, "This summer should have been filled with pride once more, parents and children waving their flags, but in reality, Wembley Stadium could be filled more than twice over with children who'd had to skip meals during lockdown because their families are not able to access food. 200,000 children, according to the Food Foundation estimates." Now, this is a great use of imagery to help us understand a statistical aspect of what's going on. We've all probably been to a sports stadium at some point or to a live music event, and Wembley Stadium is absolutely huge. We can imagine what it's like for all of these children, 200,000 of them, two stadiums full of two Wembley stadiums full, sitting there having to have skipped a meal, or parents having to have made that choice where a child was not able to eat for one of the meals because they did not have the means to be able to do so. That imagery is really powerful and it connects with us. And that's why he uses it so well, to start to take something that is an analytical figure and turn it into something that is a metaphorical understanding. The next example that's really powerful in here is, "As their stomachs grumble, I wonder if those 200,000 children will ever be proud enough of their country to put on an England national team shirt one day and sing the national anthem from the stands." Now, this is trying to start to create community and bring us into his tribe. He also uses great use of those kind of senses that we were talking about earlier by using the word grumble. Because we've all had a stomach grumble, so we can all imagine what it's like for a child who's in that situation. And the reason that he's trying to create a community is he's talking about shared values here. So what we want to be able to do is go, well, would children be proud of being part of this country if that country was not able to provide them with what they needed in order to survive and thrive? The next example I'm going to go down to is just a little bit further down in that paragraph, which is, "This is not about politics. This is about humanity. Looking at ourselves in the mirror and feeling that we did everything that we could to protect those who can't, for whatever reason or circumstances, protect themselves. Political affiliations aside, can we not all agree that no child should be going to bed hungry?" Once again, this is about extending that community, building up shared values, shared experience. I think you would struggle to find people who would say, "I do believe that children should be going to bed hungry," and that is an acceptable part. So by therefore stripping people of political identity and focusing on something that we can all agree on, we are all now part of this issue. We are all now part of the solution to that issue, and we can all take action upon it. The next bit I want to highlight is at the top of the second page, which is, "I am asking you to listen to the parent stories as I have done and have thousands of insights from people who are struggling. I have listened when fathers have told me that they are struggling with depression, unable to sleep, worried sick about how they are going to support their families having lost their jobs unexpectedly, head teachers who are personally covering the cost of food packages for vulnerable families after the school debit card has been maxed out, mothers who can't cover the cost of increased electricity or food bills during the lockdown, and parents who are sacrificing their own meal for their children in 2020, this shouldn't be a case of one or the other. So once again, he's now utilizing the shared experiences of mothers, teachers, fathers, and explaining the experience that they're going through. And that really connects with our audience, because a lot of us would be able to identify with some of those tags in some ways, particularly parents. Overall, this part of the public narrative that Marcus has created is designed to talk to our head. So his story spoke to our heart. This blue section speaks to our head. That's why it also contains lots of facts, figures, and experiences that other people have had. So the next part we're moving on to is our story of now. What we're doing here is we are trying to transition to a point of creating a sense of urgency. Now, I managed to wangle myself some sales training last week, and we were discussing the power of pain and what it means to feel pain now versus pain later or gratification. The story of now has a lot of power because it needs to make us feel pain now. It has to be a current pain. It is a pain that we need to do something about because we are feeling it at this point. And that's going to be the kind of pain that mobilizes people to take action now. Now, let me just kind of give that a bit of importance, that the pain that we might feel in the future is something that we might keep an eye out for, but it might take 6 months before we're willing to do something about it. It's one of the good examples of this is why you might have noticed that when we discuss climate change, those social narratives in recent years have been talking about the massive impact climate change is having now, rather than the impact that it's going to have in the future. If you're telling people it's going to be a problem in the future, it's unlikely to motivate a lot of people in the here and now. Greta Thunberg does a great example of rewording some of those traditional climate change narratives when she said, "I want you to act like the house is on fire because it is." Now, we all imagine the decisions that we can make during a crisis, and if the house was on fire, we wouldn't be thinking about dealing with a problem in a week's time, a day's time, an hour's time, or until the alarm goes off. We're going to deal with that problem immediately. And that's what we're trying to do with the story of now, is to create that sense of needing to do something immediately. Just as kind of a very quick side note, that one of the weakest stories that we could include in the story of now is around gratification, because it's not necessarily important, but because we have time, and it's also something that's just harder to make people engage with. So I'm going to just do the quick start of that story here. During the pandemic, people are existing on a knife's edge. One missed bill is having a spiraling effect. The anxiety and stress of knowing that poverty is the main driver of children ending up in care, a system that is designed to fail low-income families. Do you know how much courage it takes for a grown man to say, "I can't cope," or "I can't support my family"? Men, women, caregivers are all calling out for help, and we are not listening. So what he's done there, this is a transitional between the story of us, which is looking at that community, and the story of now. And he's done that by creating an urgency. One of the most powerful urgencies as part of this is saying a grown man saying, "I can't help, I can't support my family." We know traditionally that men are terrible at asking for help when they need it. And it causes potentially a lot of issues to those individuals. So therefore, when Marcus is talking about having experience listening to people saying, "I can't cope, I can't support my family," we realize that this is a problem that's hitting people quite hard, and it's hitting them now. The next bit that I want to highlight here is just a little bit further down, and it says, "Parents like mine would rely on kids clubs over the summer break, providing a safe space or at least one meal while they work. Today's parents do not have this option. If faced with unemployment, parents like mine would have been down at the job centre first thing on a Monday morning to find work that enables them to support their families. Today, there are no jobs. As a black man from a low-income family in Manchester, I could have been just another statistic. Instead, due to the selfless actions of my mum, my family, and my neighbours and coaches, the only stats that I'm associated with are goals, appearances, and caps. I would be doing myself, my family, and my community an injustice if I didn't stand here today with my voice and use my platform to ask for your help. Now, that is a really useful aspect of a really good example of being able to show how we can transition between three stories. So we don't always have to go linear. We could go backwards and forwards between these three. And this is an example of being able to do this, where he takes the story of now and he then utilizes a sense of purpose to be able to move it into his story of self. And then from the story of self, very quickly, he drives it back into the story of us by creating a sense of community, literally using the words, I would be doing myself, my family, and my community an injustice if I didn't stand here today. So we're now incorporating a lot of people into why these actions are being taken. Finally, this last example of how he ends the letter is the government has taken an approach to the economy, a whatever it takes approach to the economy. I'm asking you today to extend that same thinking to protecting all vulnerable children across England. I encourage you to hear their stories and hear their pleas and find your humanity. Please reconsider your decision to cancel the food voucher scheme over the summer holiday period and guarantee an extension. This is England in 2020. And this is an issue that urgently requires assistance. Please, while the eyes of the nation are on you, make the U-turn and make protecting the lives of some of the most vulnerable a top priority. So, once again, really pressing on the urgency of this issue by using words, well, you've taken a whatever it takes approach to the economy. You need to be able to apply that same approach to vulnerable people. And also by using words like, this is an urgent priority, we need to make protecting vulnerable people a top priority. This makes it a problem that is clearly a here and now problem that needs action immediately. The other thing that he's doing in here is clearly calling upon the people that need to take action, what action they need to take, and outlining what action they need to take. And also he outlines the strategy for success. So by saying, please reconsider your decision to cancel the food voucher scheme over the summer holiday and guarantee the extension. He's giving people the exact action that needs taken. The people that he is calling on, he's stated very clearly, which is the government needs to take this action. So those people know what they need to be able to do, and he's outlined exactly what that action is. So by using the story of now, he's created a strategy for people to actually mobilize and do something about the issue that he's raised during this letter. So, in the description, I've put a couple of links to some great videos that show the application of this model in speeches. The first one is by a gentleman called James Croft, who I believe was a student of Marshall Gantz at Harvard. He uses the public narrative model fantastically when crafting his piece about LGBTQ bullying. The other is Rita O'Grady's speech from the film Made in Dagenham, which is about equal pay for women in the workplace. Once again, it's a great example of how to apply this model to have a profound impact. So, let's start talking about creating your narrative. The first thing that you are going to need to do is identify the challenge that you are calling others to face and the action that you would like them to take. Before even starting to write something out, this should be very clear to you about what are you actually asking people to do and why do you want them to be able to do it. If it's not clear to you, it's definitely not going to be clear to them. So make sure that you've understood the problem that you are trying to solve and start to think about who you might want to be able to engage with you in being able to take this action. The next thing to do is identify the emotions and values that are part of that. So as we said at the very beginning, if you don't know what the emotions are that are connecting people to be able to do things, then we're not going to be able to influence their values. We need to be able to start talking to them on an emotional level. So identify the emotions that people feel because of it, and identify what kind of values people have if they're going to be upset by this issue or angry about this issue, because that's going to be something you're going to need to call upon your narrative. A great example in Rashford's one was when he started talking about can't we all agree that no children should go to bed hungry. Now, he knows that that is a value that a lot of people hold, and he's done that by identifying the emotions and values that tie into it. The next one is start to develop your stories of self. So use stories that show where you've had a challenge, choice, and outcome. Just to, once again, I know I drummed this one home, but it's a really interesting point to make sure that you are designing your stories based on this, which is it needs to have a plot that begins with an unexpected challenge that confronts a character, confronts the individual, and it's something that they need to pay urgent attention to, that they need to make a choice, and that it has to be a choice for which that individual is unprepared, and that choice yields an outcome, and that outcome teaches a moral. I know that's a long-winded bit, but that will give you some help in being able to do that. So when you start to think of your story, make sure it is one that has those different elements, because those are the things that are going to connect us to what's happening. We like to listen to stories about triumph over adversity, or even about adversity in general, because we need to be able to understand what's motivating you to be able to do this. And normally the motivating factor is that there is some kind of problem that's going on. Normally social change narratives, I can't think of any that would go, everything's all right, so do something about it. We need something to be wrong in order to do something about it. The next thing I'd like you to do is think about developing the story of us. So who are the community or people that you want to call upon to join you in taking action? It's really important that we try to think about who's going to do what. There's no point having a social movement with people getting involved if we don't know who those people are. We will know that there is a particular community that we need to be able to help, and ideally you want to make that community probably as wide as possible, because the more people that you can connect with to it, the more people that have that shared values and emotion, the more power that social change that those people are going to have. So it's really important that you think about the communities who are going to join you in action, and you utilize their stories in the stories of us. The final part is to develop your story of now. So think about, what's your strategy? What actions do people need to take what actions do people need to take? And you need to think about the people that you've identified and what you want them to be able to do. So if I was using Rashford's one, he identified that the people that needed to take action were the government, and he gave them the strategy for being able to do so. So just a little bit of help on those first steps. Here is a list of some ideas that might spark your social change themes that you might want to consider. So it might be an issue that you care about. It might be a challenge that you faced growing up. It might be the role models within the community. James Croft's example that's in the description is a really great example of how important it is to be a role model and take that space. So it's a great example in that one. It might be around people being able to access jobs or careers, or how that people move up the corporate ladder. Those kind of things can definitely be utilised using social change themes as well. And definitely finding something that is your passion to be able to do. If it's around a particular issue that you care about, those are always going to be the stories that have the most amount of impact. So that concludes the prepared content that I have. Just a reminder that that's a lot of information to take in a short space of time. And this content is an overview of a much more longer interactive workshop that I can deliver for your organisation if it's something you're interested in. And if you're interested in this workshop or any other learning needs for your organisation, then please don't hesitate to get in contact. It would be great to connect with you. I'm going to jump into the live chats to see if anyone has any questions or comments. I think there's about a delay of a minute between mine and yours, so I'll jump in to see if there's going to be anything in there. but I wouldn't expect necessarily for it to be there straight away, but I will keep it on after finishing the video in case anyone does have something. And I just want to thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you found this webinar useful, and if you did, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe. It'd be great to have you following the channel for future content and other topics that we have coming up. So let me quickly jump into the chat. Just before I do, the other thing I want to say is that I have put together a useful guide for helping you to craft your own social narratives. It's available in the description, and you just quickly go onto the website and it'll give you all of the links to be able to start creating your own social change narrative. So I'm going to jump into the questions now, but if you're heading off at this point, once again, I just want to thank you for joining, and I hope that you have a lovely evening. We've got a comment from Michaela there. Thank you so much. So brilliant webinar, Jamie. I'm taking away a lot from it. Much appreciated. Thank you for joining. I hope it is useful. It's definitely a device and information that I found really useful in developing my narratives. And I hope it's something that, enables you to do the change that you want to see in the world. There's another question there, which is, if the story isn't your own, how do you create that story of self? So there will always be some kind of connection that you have to that story, or the person that you're talking about. So if you're thinking about, in Marcus Rashford's case, his one was around his mother being part of, the challenges that she faced raising a child and not necessarily having the money and resources there to be able to provide them with meals. So although it is part of his story, he explains his connection to it, and he explains how the person that he is talking about had to make choices that are relevant to it. But it is always important that you think about how it connects to you in some way, because if it doesn't, you don't have any emotional connection to it or any motivation behind it, it's going to be difficult for people to understand why this is something that's important to you. It kind of goes back to that initial quote, which is, if I am not for myself, then who is, kind of thing. And that's why we need to understand why you have a connection to it. Even if you're talking about friends, family, anything like that, it's always a powerful part to get them involved. And it can be explaining your relationships to them as well. Another comment there from Amelia. Thank you, Jamie. It was great. Thank you very much for joining. It's really appreciated. It's our first live webinar, so an interesting experiment, and I hope it worked out well. Great. Well, there's not any other comments coming through, which is fine, not a problem at all. Thank you all. Oh, one more come up. Does this one from Sophie. Thanks, Jamie. It was great. Does this content stay up once the live stops, so we can go back to it again? Yes, it will do. So what I'll do is I will republish the video, so you'll be able to access it and go through it. And once again, if you want to be able to share with friends, colleagues, or anyone who wants to be able to kind of make that social change, do feel free to share. Great. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope you have a lovely evening. We're finishing pretty much on time. I'm quite impressed with that. So have a great day, and I shall catch you all soon. Bye.